Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Monday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information for your community and village around Alaska by going to weather.gov/Alaska or giving us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube during the day. Around 4 o'clock, you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing from the NWS Anchorage YouTube channel there. You can also go to the top search bar on YouTube and type in AKwx TV, and that's where you'll find the complete broadcast of what you're watching now each day. A little bit later on in the evening after our live presentation, but you can go back and watch bits and pieces that you might have missed or want to watch again. The Hazardous Weather Outlook has some information that you should pay attention to now and maybe watch it again later tonight as well. Winter storm watches here are painted in orange. It goes all the way across the northern and eastern parts of the Gulf of Alaska and inland toward Juneau and Haines and up toward Skagway. This winter storm watch will be in effect for Tuesday evening and into Wednesday, so it starts tomorrow. And we're expecting that we're going to see more wind and more snow in some of the places that have already seen quite a bit of that already this season, a lot more so than some places in south central or southwestern Alaska. For the White Pass area, we may see another 6 to 8 inches of snow. Around Yakutat and Gustavus, about 3 to 9 inches of snow is possible. And for Juneau and Haines, 6 to 12 inches of snow may be possible. And of course, you need to factor in the potential for wind and perhaps some dangerous wind chills in that area. White Pass will be one of the places that probably gets the worst amount of that wind and wind chill. And even tonight, a winter weather advisory is still in effect. You may be looking at another 6 to 8 inches of snow in that region for the winter storm watch, but a winter weather advisory for White Pass is in effect now just for the wind, where it could feel like 40 below. So a lot going on across northern parts of southeast and the Gulf Coast there for incoming snow, or at least the potential thereof, starting tomorrow evening. And for the wind that's still blowing through White Pass right now, that could make it feel like 40 below. So be extra careful if you plan to travel the Klondike Highway either tonight, tomorrow, or in the coming days. A look up north shows that southeast is not alone with a winter weather refund. It looks like a winter weather advisory is in effect still for Fort Yukon there, watching for blowing and drifting snow in that region thanks to the cold temperatures and the cold winds still moving around there. So watch for a winter weather advisory to continue there tonight and into tomorrow as well. Now out across the west and southwest, not a whole lot going on as far as warnings, watches, or advisories go, but the wind is still moving offshore and there's still some bitter wind chills there, just not reaching that advisory level. So we're not talking about things that could feel as cold as 35, 45, or 50 below right now. Out across the west, you can trace this upside down shaped U pattern all the way across the Bering Sea. High pressure is still anchored out across eastern Siberia and the Kamchatka Peninsula. As that is allowing moisture to work northward, it is allowing the cold air to drop southward, and waves of low pressure are working their way from east to west out of the Gulf and into areas just south of the Aleutians. The most notable system right now is south of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. It's spinning more moisture northward, and that's bringing some clouds back toward the Pribilofs and some gusty winds there today, and bringing snow back through Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. And periods of snow showers will continue across the Aleutians as we head through the midweek. Looking at the rest of Alaska, you can see southeast is catching a little bit of a break, but you can look a little bit further south and know that that break probably will not last very long. The more active part of the weather system right now is a large trough of low pressure that in the upper atmosphere is circulating right about here. And that's grabbed that Pacific moisture and pulled that northward. It also has more moisture and warm air it's lifting northward. And some of that is going to create a surface storm that'll bring itself right back into southeastern Alaska. So once again, we're watching for that period of snow and wind to develop across southeast. And still the wind is going through the White Pass region right now. For most of northern and interior Alaska, the sky's been pretty clear. The air is pretty dry, so the risk for icing and the risk for precipitation really isn't much of an issue. There may be something developing as we head into the midweek for areas around the middle Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley. We'll be watching for snow to develop in that region as we head toward about Wednesday. But for right now, most of the activity is really centered up on the western sections of the Gulf. You can see cloud cover moving northward. You can see another band of clouds and perhaps snow underneath that working its way up the Cook Inlet. If you're in south central Alaska, primarily Anchorage, Mat-Su, probably the Susitna Valley, and the western part of the Kenai Peninsula, you need to be prepared for at least a very light dusting of snow. It doesn't look like there will be a tremendous amount of accumulation in most of these areas, perhaps 1 to 2 inches in the Susitna Valley, especially west of the highway. But most areas are going to see a very, let's say, a heavy dusting of snow, and we got to kind of play it up a little bit since we haven't had a whole lot this season. So do expect some snow to fly. Will it be a lot? It doesn't look like we would call it Alaska a lot at this point for south central, but snow may be coming. For southwest, it looks like more clouds are working away from the coastline there. A little bit of ice there in Bristol Bay, of course, is kind of starting to freeze things up a little bit more. The clouds continue to stream off, and you continue to be in a mainly dry pattern. But north of King Salmon, while things look dry there, south of King Salmon, you'll have a developing chance of snow as well as we head into the coming days. You've seen a few flakes fly today. Try saying that 5 times fast. Up across the Arctic coast, a cold front is swinging through once again. Not a whole lot of moisture ahead of that. Wouldn't be surprised to see a few flakes as that passes through. The winds will be more of an issue for that as that drives through the Arctic coast from west to east in the coming days. For southeast, a brief break with a stationary boundary located right around Juneau to Yakutat. And down south is where most of the next round of storminess will come from. That's out over the central Gulf. As that works itself northward, it will move quickly toward southwestern Alaska and the chain. That occlusion, or that frontal boundary here that we have kind of broken up, will start to fall apart, but the onshore flow will continue, making it possible for rain and snow showers to be found across Kodiak Island. Little, if any, accumulation across the Alaska Peninsula, but you might see some light accumulation, rainfall a little bit further south and west of Sand Point. And an Alaska and Dutch Harbor will be flirting with that line of rain and snow through the next 12 hours. Snow is likely to develop across south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, and over to southeast where things are still looking dry for tonight, but by tomorrow things will probably change a little bit more as the next round of precipitation works its way up. By the end of the day, things will look a lot different than how they start out. Look for clouds to fill in fairly quickly, especially for the northern half of Alaska. Things are going to cool down, and again, that snow may start to fall for the Juneau area and points northward, where you could be looking at as much as 6 to 12 inches of snow. So that winter storm watch will go into effect tomorrow evening. For south central, showers of snow will start to wind down, especially for the Anchorage and Matanuska and Susitna valleys. Areas a little bit further west of the highway may still be dealing with some light accumulations through the day. But for Kodiak Island, it looks like you'll be back in the rain. Light snow is possible for the Bristol Bay region, mainly just south of the Kuskokwim Valley. And then as you get out toward the Alaska Peninsula and westward, the rain band starts to shift a little bit further southward. So by the time you make it west to Adak and Atka, you're probably talking about rain and snow showers. The Pribilof will likely be in all snow. For Wednesday, there's that batch of snow I was talking about around the middle Tanana Valley. That could form as a wave of low pressure moves from east to west. And that could leave a couple inches of snow in places like Fairbanks there. So keep your eye on that if you're concerned about snowy travel conditions there into the midweek. For southeast, winter weather will still continue, especially for the northern half. You'll notice that warmer weather is trying to bank in there from Sitka and southward, so this may not be a huge event for Ketchikan and Annette as far as snow goes, but the wind could be an issue, and the cold could be an issue for places like White Pass and Haines and Skagway. So keep your eye on that, especially if you're in northern sections of southeast at this point. The winter storm watch will carry you into Wednesday morning. For south central, periods of rainfall there around Prince William Sound. Snow is possible in parts of interior Kenai Peninsula. Otherwise, it's rain and snow for the Cook Inlet region as a frontal boundary moves in from southeast. Rainfall is likely again for Kodiak Island, and periods of rain and snow for the Bristol Bay region, as well as the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. So we're still talking about active weather for mainly the southern coastal areas, and perhaps a chance for some snow across the interior. Otherwise, relatively dry and breezy conditions for the northern interior, the Seward Peninsula, and the Arctic coast as high pressure tries to dig a little bit further southward right over Barrow and areas along the Beaufort Seacoast. Temperatures today are really a tale of north and south, east and west once again. Sitka was only 13 at the 3 o'clock hour, with Haines and Skagway in the mid-teens, 26 for Juneau, and points south were in the mid to even upper 30s in places like Ketchikan and Annette and Craig and Klawock. We saw considerably milder weather there. Even Haida Gwaii was showing temps in the lower 40s there. 27 around Yakutat, teens and 20s for Prince William Sound, 12 in Anchorage, and 14 up in Talkeetna, and it was nearly 20 degrees colder than that up around Fairbanks, 13 below, 29 below around Eagle, 23 below there, as conditions continue to be just bone chilling there for dogs and mushers alike. Around Fort Yukon, expect 38 below. Again, a winter weather advisory is still in effect there for the uplands, mainly the passes there in the surrounding highlands, thanks to the channeled winds that have been fairly gusty today and again through the evening. Anywhere from 25 to 35 below for the Arctic coast. Kotzebue Sound temps from 5 to 20 below there. Looked like Kimberley was 17 below. 10 above for Nome. Unalakleet was showing 3 above with Grayling, and many areas north of that anywhere from 0 to about 10 below, but Galena was a bitterly cold 16 below, just to rub it in a little bit. 6 below around McGrath. Temps in the single digits and teens for Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island was in the 30s and 40s. The Alaska Peninsula saw temperatures in the 20s and a few places in the 30s there, but that was pretty sparse. 37 in Sandpoint, 19 in St. Paul, a little bit milder in St. George as the ice edge is slowly creeping your way from the north and east. 33 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and 20s and 30s for the central and western chain. Overnight low temps will drop into the 35 to 50 below range for the interior once again, as many people are, sounds like they might be lining up around the University of Fairbanks time and temperature sign there, so don't hurt yourself, kiddos. Across the Arctic coast, 25 to 35 below for the Arctic coast, and Kotzebue Sound temps 25 to 35 below, 10 below in Nome with southwestern temperatures. A little bit milder as you head into Bristol Bay with teens and 20s there, but from Bethel north, we're talking about readings from 5 to 10 below. Kodiak 34, looks like the Alaska Peninsula in the mid to upper 30s, some places nearing 40, southeast in the 20s and 30s. High temps tomorrow in the 30s and 40s with the coldest weather in the north, obviously, around Prince William Sound in the 20s and 30s. Anchorage and many areas in Matsu will be warming up a little bit more into the mid to upper 20s. I almost said milderizing there. You can try that out for a weather word and you'll get some weird looks. 1 below in Fairbanks, anywhere from 15 to 30 below for the Arctic coast. Nome looking at 12, the west coast in the single digits and mid 20s. And then you get down to the Alaska Peninsula, 30s and 40s there. The Pribilofs at 26, Kodiak Island 42, and the Aleutians in the mid-30s. Now on to aviation weather. IFR will round out that front moving through the Gulf Coast. Looks like most of southeast maintains pretty good flying visibility throughout the daytime tomorrow. South central, it starts to worsen, and you can see that happening around Portage Valley and west of the Parks Highway on the eastern side of the Alaska Range, the southern parts of the Bering, generally south of the Pribilofs and into the central Aleutians with MVFR for a large area in the Beaufort Seacoast. Your pass conditions then should show VFR conditions for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass for your Tuesday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will transition to IFR throughout the day as snowfall continues there. Rainy Pass, MVFR conditions are expected. We'll see marginal weather there in Windy and Isabel Pass throughout your Tuesday. Ventasta Pass, we expect MVFR. Tanita Pass should lean over toward MVFR conditions as your Tuesday goes on. Portage Pass may start at IFR with some improvement during the daytime, but snow showers will still be in the region, and we do expect snow to start up in Chilkoot and White Pass by the end of the day. So your freezing lines show the surface freezing line hugging the Gulf Coast there and lifting a little bit north of the Aleutian and Alaska Peninsula. As we get out toward the eastern part of the Gulf, 2, 4, and even 6,000 foot freezing lines are visible here, but this warmer air is working northward and going to feed into the next potential for snow. Icing potential shows a ribbon of light to isolated moderate generally along the Alaska Range, but also kind of a drier patch here by the end of the day. We'll find some chunks of occasional moderate across the northern Gulf, kind of wrapping around that elevated front. And then west of Kodiak Island across the peninsula above 4,000 feet, a little bit lower as you head out toward the central chain. And across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast with just a little bit of moisture available and that front moving through, I drew in a small area of light to isolated moderate across the eastern and central Beaufort Seacoast. That'll probably be below 6,000 feet if that is realized. Now the jet stream, this is what's controlling our weather right now. In the satellite picture, we saw that circulating area of cloud cover here, and we were mainly focusing on that northern band. This is what's driving it. The storm track right now is taking a pretty hard dive south as it reaches the Aleutian chain, and then through the Pacific, and then right back north into southeastern Alaska. This main storm track is bringing up Pacific moisture, a little bit more warmth, so things in the Gulf will be getting a little bit milder with time, but it's also keeping that storm activity focused in the central and eastern Gulf and allowing those surface storms to recurve back through the Aleutians. In the meantime, that big focus for really big, deep cold that we've had in place is pushing off a little bit more to the east and a little bit to the west. So instead of seeing that cold dropping due south now, we don't see that quite so much anymore. We're getting a little bit more of that warmer influence. So wait and see what happens by the end of the week. Things may look a little bit different. In the meantime, at 9,000 feet, we have that north and westerly flow crossing the Brooks Range, 20 to 25 knots. Across the eastern Gulf, an east and southeasterly flow, again bringing up that warmer, milder, and wetter air for southeastern Alaska and more areas in Prince William Sound and Yakutat. We have a trough that extends a little bit further northward, just west of Cook Inlet. That's going to slowly work its way westward, and that's where we get back into that northerly flow for the west coast, the central Aleutians, and the Alaska Peninsula, with wind speeds there from about 20 to 30 knots. High pressures in pretty close to the same spot across the eastern part of Asia there, with north and easterly winds coming out of the Bering Strait, 20 to 40 knots, a little bit stronger once you get south of Kiska, and 25 to 40 knot winds across southwestern Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula. And you'll notice that flow is pretty much the same across the eastern Gulf, looking at 25 to as high as 50 knots south of Haida Gwaii, and winds are generally east to west across the Yukon Valley, around 20 knots or so by the time you get to Nome and Kotzebue Sound, a little bit stronger there over Norton Sound. And north and westerly winds continue across the Arctic coast, about 20 to 30 knots at times. So turbulence, we'll watch for some areas developing there in the lee of the Alaska Range and across the middle Yukon Valley below 4,000 feet. But it looks like the main focus for really rough and tumble, kind of hold on to the yoke a little bit harder weather will be out across the northern and eastern Gulf, kind of in no man's land, or where the whales live. And out across southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay, generally in the lee of the Alaska Range and over Kodiak Island below 4,000 feet. And we'll also watch for some light to isolated chop across the central and eastern chain. For now, it looks like most of southeast will be okay, but watch for some changes as we head into late Tuesday night and then onward into Wednesday with the weather front moving in. Let's look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back in just a few minutes with an update on the ice edge and its movement, and of course your marine weather forecast. Stay tuned.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. And we want to welcome back our guest, Rob Stapleton. He was on last time. Rob is an adventurer and a really good photographer. So instead of me talking, I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and we're going to look at some of his pictures. Rob?
Thanks, Harry. It's nice to be here. Well, first I wanted to tell you about the Aviation Museum's 1931 Fairchild Pilgrim. That was refurbished in 2013 and flown for the centennial celebration of aviation in Alaska. This particular picture was taken in Talkeetna, and the pilot's Terry Holliday. I don't know if you know Terry
I do
or not.
know Terry. He's been on this program.
Ah, great.
Beautiful airplane.
Next we've got Chuck Miller and Patty Miller and Chuck's AT-6. That was taken over the Kuskokwim. We were flying from Antioch to McGrath. That's where we flew all over the state to spread the word about the impact of aviation to the state of Alaska, to different villages. That's a close-up shot of the T-6 with Dick Bender.
Oh, what a great picture.
Yeah, I just shot that a week ago at Merrill Field. We've had some spectacular sunsets with this cold weather.
That's all Alaska. That's great. Oh,
Yeah, the same plane, a little different lighting there.
Beautiful.
One of the things that I do is I'm working on a project for the Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, so I'm out making pictures of the cargo aircraft on a regular basis. And I like that with those wheel trucks that are smoking it up on the touchdown.
Great timing. Wow.
Yeah, there's your final approach into Lake Hood Strip in a Cub. Yeah, I was waiting around all evening for that Cub. I heard him. I have a radio, you know, monitoring the tower, and so I heard a Cub coming in. I was like, I'm waiting for that guy. Look at the sky, you know, it's beautiful.
Great. Oh, look at that picture.
Yeah, that's Alaska Airmen's Association raffle plane that'll be raffled off this coming May. And it's actually on display in the C terminal right by the Alaska Airlines baggage check-in.
Oh, it's there right now?
Yeah, that's where it is now.
Ah, okay. Look at that.
Yeah, it's a real Mitsubishi Japanese Zero. It's one of the few left flying. I think there might be only 6 left in the whole world. But Chuck flew that over from Anchorage to Valdez. This was at the 2013 May Day fly-in.
Now, does he keep the Wings of Freedom? Where does he keep that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he leased it for a year. He no longer has it.
Oh.
And so they've got the L-13, two T6s, and the Harvard Trainer in the hangar, as well as a 206 PA-14, and they've got a Stinson L-1 project in there from the museum that they're rebuilding.
Wow, that's a great shot. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, this is my pride and joy. It's a great photograph of my airplane, and I really appreciate Rob's talent in capturing this.
I just caught you on the fly there when I was over doing some pictures for another project. Yeah, it's Jeff Banks and the Russia motor glider up around Denali Park.
Jeff has been on this program. It's been a couple years, but he's sure enthusiastic about his gliding, and that's a great picture.
Yeah, Pete Brown was, we took the door off on his 170 and followed the motor glider around, made pictures. I think Jeff's in New Zealand flying gliders as we speak.
Is he really?
Yeah, yeah.
And Pete Brown is a board member of the Safety Foundation.
Mike Hunt, wow, still out flying around.
What a legend.
Yeah.
What a great picture.
Really, he's a great guy. I really enjoy Mike.
I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, you know, if you haven't had a chance to talk to Mike, you need to find an opportunity to do that, because he's a great hero and a legend, and we're very proud of him.
Very generous man as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Rob, thank you for bringing these pictures.
You bet.
I mean, you really are a great photographer, and you're capturing some moments and things that I think will, like this picture. I mean, that's priceless.
Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you being on the program tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this. It's a little bit different format. John LaFournaise, the producer here, and Rob got together, and let me know what you think of this. Would you like to see more programs with images like this? I mean, I love looking at good pictures of airplanes, and I'll bet we could get Rob back on, and I'll bet he's got a bunch of other photos. And Rob, tell them your website.
AlaskaPhoto.com, and that's AlaskaPhoto.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would recommend going to that website and see more of the stuff that Rob does. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Please let me know, and until next time, fly safe.
And time now for an update on the sea ice edge. The movement continues to be from the north and northeast, and you'll notice St. Paul doesn't look that far away on this map. It is still about 40 to 50 nautical miles away from that leading edge of ice, and the thicker concentrations are still another 10 nautical miles back from that. But the edge is advancing, and the latest forecasts now indicate that the edge, or at least that initial concentration, may reach St. Paul here within the next several days. So plan for some changes there as the ice edge gets a little bit closer to the northern Pribilofs. It is still thickening up there across Bristol Bay and northern Cook Inlet, as well as some of the bays and passes there as you get across the northern edge of the Alaska Peninsula. And that is the latest there. Anytime you want to check out that or the forecast for the ice edge, go to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice.php. Here's a look at southeast. Now the winds are going to come up as we head into the next couple days again as northerlies develop in the Lynn Canal. Will start out tomorrow around 35 knots, 25 knots around Stevens Passage, and then southeasterlies in Clarence Strait at 25 knots. Offshore winds are blowing off of Sitka and out of Yakutat and Cross Sound, 35 to 40 knots with 12-foot seas in the north, and southeasterlies are strengthening south of Sitka toward Craig and the Dixon entrance at 35 to 40 knots. By Wednesday, you'll see northerlies in the Lynn Canal, 25 knots around Stevens Passage and Frederick Sound. Southeasterlies in Clarence Strait, 7 to 11-foot seas there, and southeasterlies coming into the coastal areas there, still running around 25 to 30 knots on Wednesday, with seas as high as 19 to 20 feet as you head down toward Dixon Entrance. For South Central, look for some stronger winds the further south you go along Cook Inlet, 25 to as high as 40 knots there south of Clam Gulch. West of the Barrens at 45 knots, and storm force winds inside of Shelikof Strait tomorrow, 14-foot seas there with a northeast wind at 50. Easterlies crossing the Gulf, 40 to 50 knots. Strong gales there coming into the eastern Barrens, 45 knots east of Kodiak Island. Northeasterlies look pretty light there in Prince William Sound, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea, up to 20 knots by Wednesday. Southeasterlies still blowing into Montague Island at 30 knots with a 19-foot sea, and winds diminish coming down Cook Inlet west of the Barrens into Shelikof Strait. So Wednesday's definitely a better day at 20 to about 30 knots. Seas still a little bit higher there west of the Barrens at 14 feet, 16 feet east of the islands, and 25 knots outside of Resurrection Bay with a 16-foot sea. The Alaska Peninsula will see north and easterly winds on either side, about 30 to 35 knots for Tuesday. 14-foot seas there north of Cold Bay, 14 to 16-foot seas there south and west of Kodiak Island to King Cove. By Wednesday, 20 to 30 knots, a little bit of a shift here from the south and east. Northeasterlies continue on the Bering side with an east wind south of Sandpoint and King Cove at 30 knots with a 10-foot sea. For the Aleutians, north and easterly winds will be the predominant flow there. About 40 knots on the Bering side, 30 to 40 knots there with lighter winds generally south of Unalaska and Nikolsky with an 11-foot sea. Northeasterlies west of Kiska only 30 knots with a 13-foot sea. Northerlies continue pretty much the same direction there on Wednesday for most areas, 35 to 40 knots on the northern side, 30 to 35 knots on the Pacific side with 25 knots around Kiska to Attu. At 13-foot seas are expected with 35 knots outside of Unalaska with a 19-foot sea. For the west coast, north and easterly winds continue at 25 to about 35 knots. Ice outside of Kuskokwim Bay. Northerlies and 15-foot seas there for the Pribilofs with a 30-knot wind from the north and east around St. Matthew. Most areas stay northerly as we head through Wednesday, 25 to 35 knots all areas. You'll see northeasterlies in the Kuskokwim Bay region. 13-foot seas are expected for the Pribilofs and 8-foot seas around the St. Matthew Island waters. Westerlies east of Barrow, 15 to 20 knots there on Tuesday, and east and northeasterly wind rounding the point there on Tuesday from Point Lay all the way down into the Kotzebue Sound region around 15 knots. That strengthens a little bit more on Wednesday up to 20 knots, and winds remain fairly light from Prudhoe Bay to Barrow, but a stronger easterly wind is found around Kaktovik at 20 knots. That's Wednesday for you. Recapping tonight's weather, a wind chill advisory continues for the White Pass area with wind chill values that could drop to about 40 degrees or so. Now watch for some blowing, drifting, and snow around the White Pass region as well, but the bigger issue will be a winter storm watch for parts of southeast that starts tomorrow evening and into Wednesday. For South Central, a quick dusting of snow may move through. Many areas probably seeing less than an inch. A better chance for some accumulating snow in the Susitna Valley as we go into Tuesday morning. There is another wave of low pressure works from from east to west across the western Gulf. Watch for snow to develop in southeast Alaska midweek. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.